Hello, I'm Margaret, and I chose to do my book talk on this story called Little Blue and Little Yellow by Leo Lionni. I love Leo Lionni, but I have never read this book before, and so it was really great to be able to read it for the first time. So I hope that you guys find it as great as I did. So just kind of an overview of the plot. It's a story about two friends, Little Blue and Little Yellow, and they're just little dots in the story. They live across the street from each other, and one day Little Blue wants to go play with Little Yellow, and so he goes and finds her, and they were so excited to see each other, so they give each other a hug, and then when they hug, they turn green. So they went home to their parents, and their parents didn't recognize them, so they were all upset because their parents were saying, "Who are you? You're not my child. You're not Little Blue. You're not Little Yellow. You're green." And so they were really sad, and so they came back together and they started crying because they're like, why do my parents not recognize me? And then they cried and cried and cried, and they were crying blue and yellow tears until they turned back to being Little Blue and Little Yellow instead of both green. So then they go back home to find their parents, and they're like, okay, do you recognize me now? Am I different now? And their parents recognize them, and so they give them a hug because they're so happy to see them. And so Little Blue's parents hug Little Blue, and they're so happy. But then also, Little Blue and Little Yellow go to the houses together, and so they also hug Little Yellow, and then they turn green, Little Blue's parents and Little Yellow. And then the same thing happens with Little Yellow's parents and Little Blue. They turn green. And so then they realize what happened, and they were happy about it, and so then they went back to tell all of their friends, and they were all hugging, and then they were all turning different colors. So it's kind of it's just a really cute story, and it's really interesting that the illustrations are just very abstract and different. And so the first passage that I thought was just really would be a good time for making predictions would be on this page here when it says, "But Papa and Mama Blue said, 'You are not our Little Blue, you are green.' And Papa and Mama Yellow said, 'You are not our Little Yellow, you are green.'" And so I just thought that that would be a great stopping point for students to kind of think about what's happening and why maybe they're not recognizing their kids and what happened, and then make a prediction of what's going to happen. And then the next passage that I thought was great is at the end when they come together and they realize what happened after they hug each other and all turn green. And the quote says, "They hugged and kissed him, and they hugged Little Yellow too. But look, they became green. Now they knew what had happened, and so they went across the street to bring the good news." So then it was something that they could celebrate and that they were happy about. So that is just kind of an overview of what this story is about. Leo Lionni is an awesome author. I love all of his books that I have. But like I said, I've never read this one before. So he was born on May 5th in 1910 in the Netherlands, and then he died in 1999 on October 11th. So just a little bit about his life. He moved to Italy and lived there until 1939. He was a very well-known artist in Italy. And then he moved to the U.S. in 1939, and he worked as an art director and then for a magazine. And then he returned to Italy again and started writing and illustrating his children's books there. So he was mainly known as an artist, but he ended up writing over 40 children's books throughout his career, and he's received tons of awards. Just a couple are the American Institute of Graphic Arts, the Caldecott Award, and he's won others too, and he's very well known. So going off of that, additional information about this book in particular, this I thought was cool because it has a really neat story behind it. This is actually his first book that he wrote. So he used to tell stories to his grandchildren, and when he was telling them, he would draw pictures to kind of explain what was happening. Well, one time he was on a train with his grandchildren, and he was telling them a story, and he wanted to illustrate it somehow, but he didn't have anything to draw with. And so he used the magazines from the train and started ripping out pieces of paper that were different colors and putting them together in that way and making a story that way. And so it ended up, that story on the train ended up turning into Little Blue and Little Yellow, and he published it, and it was his first children's book that he published, and then this is how he continued to illustrate his work. So you'll notice if you ever read any Leo Leone books that the illustrations are different, and they're kind of made out of different materials. So he finds things in nature and puts them together to form a picture, which I think are is really cool. So as far as controversial aspects of this book, I didn't really, nothing really stuck out to me as, ooh, that could be really controversial. But I was reading some reviews, and I found a few questions that the book might raise. So something that I think is really great about this story is that it has a really nice theme of synergy. And so I looked up the definition of synergy just so that I would define it correctly. So synergy is the interaction or cooperation of two or more organizations, substances, or other agents to produce a combined effect greater than the sum of the separate effects. So it's basically just the idea that when you work together, you can create something better than what you could create on your own. So I thought this book really represented that well. And so it kind of has this ongoing theme of synergy and friendship. And so some of the questions that I saw it might raise about friendship was, is it okay to disagree with a friend? Because Little Blue and Little Yellow, they just mesh together so well, and they're such good friends, and they turn green together, and it seems like their friendship is perfect and that they don't disagree on anything. And so, I mean, obviously this would happen in younger students, but younger students might ask, well, is it okay to disagree with my friend? Or on the opposite side of that, well, is it okay, like, if we don't come up with if we don't mesh great like that, if we don't turn green, essentially. And so, yeah, I just thought that it might raise some questions just about what friendship looks like, because there's a pretty clear picture of what it looks like in this story. So yeah, I really like this story because I think it is just a great book to teach about synergy and working together collaboratively with classmates and friends. And synergy is also one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. And I remember when I was growing up in my school, we always learned about all of those, and we always incorporated them somehow into our day. And so I thought this would be a great book and a great activity to use for synergy. So, Little Blue and Little Yellow by Leo Leone is an excellent story to read in a classroom that teaches students about synergy and how working cooperatively with others can create something much greater than what one could do on their own.